Now let's continue here with part 2 of enabled functions by level. And in part 1 I gave you the bad news that they may well ask you questions. For example, saying you want to use the AES encryption at 256 bits. What domain functional level do you need to have? Or, you can't do it right now. What do you need to do to make it happen? And you're going to have to raise the domain functional level from server 2003 to server 2008. So you could get those kind of questions. So anyway, go back and watch the first movie, the first part, for all of my advice and insight about this subject. Now, one other thing you pick up in server 2008 at the domain functional level when you raise it from 03 to 08, the last interactive logon information, and this is very similar to that timestamp stuff a little earlier. The time, the name of the workstation, the number of failed logon attempts, all now get stored in various user attributes on each domain logon. But again, you can see Microsoft's trying to provide us more security information, more auditable information for each user that logs on, and that's a good thing. Next up, fine-grained password policies. You've probably heard about this one. It got a lot of coverage in the marketing. And this is where we can set unique password policies for users or groups in the domain. In the past, your password policies applied to the entire domain, period. But now you can apply them. And what you'll normally see on this, and you'll probably see something about this on the exam, administrators are both the company's best friend and worst potential enemy. And to protect administrators and to protect the company from administrators, what you want to do is probably have different password policies on administrator accounts. And a lot of companies now have different levels of administrator accounts. If I'm an administrator, and when I'm doing consulting with a lot of companies, I may have 3 different levels of administrator accounts. One, I just log in and I can see, just about anything I want to see. The next one, I can see everything and I can change certain things. And then the last one is the big one where I can change a whole lot more things, if not everything. But what I don't want to do is log in with the most possible permissions and then inadvertently do something. And fine-grained policies allow us to do those kinds of things. At this point, that's our domain functional levels. Now let's talk about the forest functional levels and what you get there. When you go to server 2003 functional level at the forest level, and I'll show you in a different video how to set these things, you pick up forest trust. That was where you can create trust relationships between forests. Then domain rename, you have to do this at the forest level and at the domain level, but we can rename the domains within the forest. Linked value replication. Now this is something else Microsoft struggled with a bit early on in Active Directory's life, and that is replication became a problem at some places. And so linked value replication, once you go to 2003 level, there's just more efficient replication, which means less traffic when you change memberships on groups. They had all kind of trouble with the universal groups and all that. But then we get read-only domain controllers in the 2003 functional level. And a read-only domain controller is a domain controller that has a read-only copy of Active Directory. You can't update Active Directory. It also doesn't have all of Active Directory necessarily, and we'll talk about read-only domain controllers in a different video. You have an improved knowledge consistency checker, the KCC. Notice this is improved replication for forests with more than 100 sites. That is a big implementation. Okay, but just know that you get an improved knowledge consistency checker. Remember that inet org person object talked about in the previous video? That thing is used to connect to non-Microsoft directory services, Kerberos type services. Well, you can now convert that into a user object, and you might want to go read about that if you're having those issues. There's also now support for dynamic object auxiliary class, and this class can be used in domain directory partitions now. This helps the applications that are using it, and it also helps developers who are writing applications that store and read things in Active Directory. Notice right here, Windows Server 2003, you get support for application basic groups and LDAP query groups, and this is all part of that role-based authentication. There's deactivation and redefinition of attributes and objects. Now this is a big one. You can deactivate and you can redefine attributes or object classes, but you still can't delete them. And this has been a big deal because we took off on this whole idea of changing the schema in Active Directory and extending it. But then after a while we realized, wait a minute, after we install, a few of these applications that do this, we're getting into some problems now about our Active Directory just gets larger and larger and larger. So Microsoft does not want to go into that murky area of deleting things from Active Directory. That could be a nightmare as far as the structure and the schema. We still can't do that, but we can deactivate some things and we can redefine some of the attributes, kind of reuse them. Then notice this. This is kind of odd, and becomes a trick question on the exam, or it could trip you up. I hate to use the word trick question, but Windows Server 2008 Forest functional level, what does it add? You won't see this very often. No new forest-wide functionalities in Server 2008 at the Forest functional level. However, once you're at the 2008 Forest functional level, all new domains automatically default to the Windows Server 2008 domain functional level. So you can't go backwards. Once you're 2008 Forest functional level, you cannot take your domains back to Windows Server 2003. A lot of stuff here, guys. I'm sorry to do it to you. Look over this. Be familiar with it. Just know that you could get questions about these functionalities in the various levels. So good luck with it.